Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, my beautiful people. Happy Tuesday, March the 4th. Today is Tuesday, March the 4th. Yesterday, we went into the article and we had a great conversation about the state of the Canadian economy, specifically the Canadian consumer, and how increased debt loads are affecting Canadian consumers. Today, we're going to take right back up from where we left off yesterday. So, if you recall, we read an article together, and the purpose of the article and what we will be doing over the next coming days is we will be discussing the article, and I will be giving you tips so that you can help to avoid the pitfalls that are warned in the article. Okay. So, welcome to Mrs. Moneybags Live. I am Nicole Williams, and I am your go to podcast for everything mortgages. Whether you're buying your first home, refinancing, or investing in real estate, we break down the mortgage process, we share expert tips, and help you make smarter financial decisions. Be sure to subscribe now. Let's dive right in. So, again, as I had mentioned, we discussed the article yesterday, and we're going to go over the first three paragraphs just to kind of give us a refresher of what was said. And then what I will do is we're going to discuss how we can get out of debt and how we can use this video as a reminder that we are to lend and not to borrow. So I invite you to also visit the link tree link in my description. This will allow you to book some one-on-one time with me for anybody who might find that they are in the exact situation and scenario that we are covering within this article. So let's dive right into it. Again, as I said, we're going to read essentially the first 3 points verbatim. Okay. And just to remind you, the article is titled, "Is one of Canada's biggest housing markets at risk from debt burdened consumers?" That is the name of the title. Is one of Canada's biggest housing markets at risk from debt burdened consumers? So we're going to read the first three chapters and then we're going to explore a little bit further. So Canadian households are continuing to ride a wave of challenging economic conditions, and for some, that may put their most valuable asset at risk. With the seemingly never ending wave of headwinds of uncertainties, relying on credit has been the only option for many people, taking the aggregate level of Canadian consumer debt to more than at the end of 2024. Fueled by non-bank auto loans, average non-mortgage debt per consumer reached $21,931 in the fourth quarter. But some households are at a breaking point, and the latest Equifax Canada report on consumer credit trends reveals that in the fourth quarter of 2024, a divide was opening up between those who have benefited from lower interest rates and those whose debts are overwhelming them. Wow. So, as you can hear, $2.5 trillion in debt is what the Canadian consumers are fueled with. That is an astronomical amount. But what does this mean? We are not to live in fear. We are not to live in fear. And we are to remind ourselves that we are here for a greater purpose. And being burdened down by debt is not a part of that purpose. Debt is basically a yoke that keeps us under the thumb of our keeps us under the yoke of our individuals in which we borrow from. Okay. And as a reminder, we are to lend and not to borrow. We are to come out of this yoke. But how do we get out of debt? And what is debt? Okay. So debt is money that is borrowed by an individual, a business, or a government that must be paid, usually with interest and usually with a term Somewhere between 3 to 5 years would be considered short term, and anything longer than that would be considered a long term loan. And a part of that long term loan debt usually includes mortgage debt. But what we have been seeing in the last couple of years is that auto loans are now going from becoming short term debt to long term debt. And this is also what impacts the amount of debt that the Canadian consumers are being faced with. Okay, so when we talk about the types of debt that are there are secured debt. So that is usually backed by collateral. So that's an example, the car loan, a mortgage loan, an investment loan, things of that nature. There's also unsecured debt. And that is where there's no collateral that's required. We are using primarily a person's history, payment history. That's where we would look at their Equifax reports to determine how credit worthy the individual is. There's also revolving debt. So there could be debt that is revolving, similar to a line of credit or a credit card, where you're given a certain advance of money, and as you pay and borrow and pay and borrow, you still have access to that initial advanced amount as long as you're making payments as agreed. Okay. So now that we understand the different types of debt that we as Canadian consumers are faced with, it now boils down to the concept of good debt versus bad debt. And the reality is there anything such as good debt? Over the years, as I've gotten older, I realize a lot of things can be considered marketing, to get people comfortable with the thought of being programmed into things that maybe they should not really be programmed into. So, does debt help individuals when you're in a need? Yes. So, what might be considered good debt for me might not be considered good debt for you. This is why it's very important that you get down to the why you are doing things. Why do you spend the way that you're spending? Is the spending that you're spending helping to elevate your family, or is it putting your family in a situation where you potentially will lose the greatest asset in most individuals' case? And that greatest asset could be their home. We have to get back to basics of really understanding our budgets, what our affordability is, understanding what makes sense to propel us into a positive space. And if just consumer debt is being laden on us, through the usage of credit cards, through the usage of lines of credits, even sometimes student loan debt, it can become a noose for us. Um, Again, but if there is a plan and you know why you're doing what you're doing, and you have a great exit strategy of determining how you will get out of these situations, then again, who am I to say that it's good or bad? But typically speaking, you know, good debt would be considered anything that allows you to purchase where there's an appreciated value. So typically speaking, a good debt would be looked at as a mortgage, because why? It's tied to an appreciating asset. Okay. You always hear the concept of bad debt being a car loan, because as soon as you drive off the lot, the car's value goes down. But I've also heard the argument where people say that a car is essential for their business. So without having a car, it prohibits them from making the income in which they need to fuel other areas of their life. So again, I will say, don't get so caught up in the concept of good debt versus bad debt. Get caught up in the concept of understanding why you're spending what you're spending, why you're doing what you're doing, and having a true plan for your life. Remember, we are put on this earth for a time, and we do not want to be constantly consumed with things that boggle us down while we are here. We are here to enjoy ourselves. We are here to move the mission forward. We're here to help humanity. We are here to leave the earth and the world in a better place. And if you're so ladled down with debt, it becomes hard for you to truly live out your true mission. Okay, so again, the concept of good debt, bad debt, the different types of debt, it's all irrelevant in my opinion. What's important is why you are spending what you're spending, how you're spending what you're spending, what your overall plan is, and how will you get the income in order to help reduce. Because as we're seeing, Canadian consumers are being strapped with debt. And a lot of it does have to do with, we're coming out of the pandemic. People lost their jobs. People are using credit now to help supplement their day to day living. And we get that. But this is where now having professionals in your corner, having a strong, solid plan is important now more than ever. That is why I'm so thankful for the years that I've been in this mortgage industry. I have been able to work with many families similar to yours and helping them to get their footing back on track. Our house is supposed to be a joy. It's supposed to bring us joy. It's supposed to bring us love. It's supposed to bring us peace. And there's nothing wrong with being able to utilize your resources as needed, but you do not want to deplete your resources or put your resources in a position where now they have control ultimately over your life. Okay, so we must learn how to manage debt and how to manage debt effectively. Okay, we need to ensure that we're making our payments on time. I know everyone talks about making certain that we're making at least our minimum payments. Minimum payments are great because it helps to ensure that you're not affecting your credit. But I'm here to tell you that minimum payments are not enough. We need to break through. We need to get to the point of where we no longer have debt. Debt is a nuisance that I know that we have the power to get out of. Okay, we also need to pay more than just the bare minimum. you know have an actual plan. How long will it take you if you're going to be financing a vehicle? Realistically speaking, how long is it that you're going to either a save so that you can purchase this vehicle in cash, you know trusting in the Lord that that the funds will come in so that you can buy it in cash. And if you can't buy it in cash, what is your plan on repayment? We are seeing auto loans now going to 8 years. Some people are doing 6 years. Some people are doing even 10 years. These things, I am not one to tell people what to do, but you have to look at your overall plan. Will having an auto loan for 8 years improve your situation, or will it be a hindrance to your situation? And we also have to get out of the mindset of being in the temporary right now, right? Because right now it might feel good, but if you perhaps planned a little bit better, maybe in the next couple of months, that short term feeling would become a long-term feeling. Because what typically happens is in the short term, we feel great, we buy a new car, we buy that new outfit, we put it on credit card, but then in 30 days when that payment becomes due, we become depressed, we become sad, we start to figure out, oh, how am I going to make this payment? Rather than having a plan of attack from the beginning. What we need to do is have a plan of attack from the beginning. Okay. We also need to, and sometimes consolidate and refinance. Sometimes that is what the option is, and there's nothing wrong with it. The thing is now is when individuals are constantly dipping into the pool and constantly refinancing and constantly consolidating debt, what that shows me is that they haven't really gotten to the source of what their situation or what their problem is. Okay. If we're constantly having to restructure, again, I'm not one to judge. I always try to work with individuals, but my goal is that if we're going to restructure your debt, you are going to have a plan of attack of how you will not get into this situation again and how you can bring in enough cash flow that, again, instead of increasing your debt load, you're reducing it with success. Okay. And also, we have to be mindful of avoiding taking unnecessary debt. One thing I like to say to people is stand your grounds. And if you have a plan, then you cannot be swayed. What I mean by this is now when you have made plans for a vacation, you know exactly, okay, I'm going on this vacation. This is how much it's going to cost me. This is how much I'm budgeting for it. And you stick to that budget versus somebody who on the whim says, oh, let's go to wherever. on a whim. It feels great on a whim to put it on your credit card. It feels great on a whim to be traveling. But then when you come back, what happens with how you're going to repay that if you do not have enough cash flow coming in to repay? Gone are the days where we can refinance debt at super, super rock low prices. It is true rates are starting to come back down, but they are still higher than what individuals may have had 2, 3, or 4 years ago. So the cost of debt is costing us even a little bit more. So we want to avoid unnecessary debt wherever possible. Again, if you need to consolidate to get yourself back on a footing, it is what it is. But once you've consolidated and refinanced to put yourself on a better footing, what are you doing now to ensure you have enough cash flow coming in to avoid those pitfalls? Okay, so this was just a simple look into the first three paragraphs. Tomorrow we'll be exploring the additional paragraphs, and I'll be giving you some tips and tactics on what you can do to also be successful. This year is all about our financial success. We can no longer do what we did in the past. We are moving forward with positivity. We are moving forward with great light. We are to lend and we are not to borrow. Okay, so be sure to subscribe and like. And here's to your health, your wealth, with love from Ms. Moneybags. See you tomorrow.